You're listening to Reignite, a podcast where nerds can be free. This week we have Colin Parker, president and co-founder of the Scavengers Network, co-host of Journey Under 30, and current keeper on Myth Takes. He has been described by friends as having a certain joie de vivre. Well, those friends like showing off the French words that they know. Find him on Twitter and tell him all about your podcast and all the podcasts you love. He's your keeper, your pod boss, your best friend, and your commander. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. I, of course, am Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And I'm MJ.
Yeah, I think that it's always fun to interact with others who are super into Mass Effect because the dynamics of where people came to this series are so different sometimes. Mm-hmm. And yet, you know, I don't know anyone who just casually likes Mass Effect. For the most part, if they've played at least the first two games, they are diehard fans who have played the whole series.
I think that's a fair point, yeah.
Now, when I first started talking to Colin, it was in the My Brother and Me Podcasters Network. Mm-hmm. I put out a call for like, hey, I do a podcast about Mass Effect. And Colin was one of the first people that was like, oh my god.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, hey, I'll hop on that N7 day for sure.
Well, we thank you for that as well. It's always interesting to see how excited people get about very specific things within the universe first. But I think before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we wanted to start by asking you, Colin, how you actually came to discover Mass Effect. What brought you to this game and the series?
Okay, this is kind of a odd talking point, I feel like. Not like the question, but I mean, like, for me, like, my answer is probably very lackluster. So the game, now I'm actually trying to remember the exact year that Mass Effect 1 came out. Hang on, now I gotta look it up. Mass Effect 1. What year did that actually come out? So that was 2007, right? Okay, that's right. And I knew it had been out for a while because of the fact that one year, right after I graduated from high school, I went off to college and I got my very first Xbox 360. And I had not had a Xbox for a while. Every game system basically that I had was very outdated, and I was very bummed about it because I could never play any of the new games. And so for Christmas, I finally got this Xbox 360. And I also happened to get from a friend of the family a like pretty large gift card to Best Buy. I got $50 to Best Buy. So I went out, and this is winter of 2009, I think. No, sorry, it was on my second year, so it was 2010. Sorry, and so in 2010, winter of 2010, I went out to Best Buy to get a couple of games that I could play on this brand new system because it only came with one, and I was like, I'm gonna play this box till the day that I die. And Mass Effect happened to be like $5. Because it had been out for a while, and I was like, yeah, sure, I guess I'll get it. And I, didn't play it for, I want to say, like, maybe 2 or 3 months, because I was playing through the other games. And, like, the box art didn't really tell me much, but I was just like, it's $5, like, I can afford it. And then once I started playing, I was immediately hooked. And I was like, oh, I want more. And I was very intrigued by the entire story and everything that they had set up, and I was very excited about where it would go from there, basically. So that's how I got into it, was just a happenstance $5 purchase.
And so now, at that point, the second one hadn't come out yet, had it?
I think it had.
Oh, maybe it had. So
I think it had just come out.
So did you run and go buy the other games, like, pretty much as soon as they came out?
So I waited a little bit on Mass Effect 2 because luckily my birthday is shortly after Christmas. And so I think that I actually first started playing this game like right before my birthday. It was like just like a week or so before. So I told my parents that I was like, hey, if you haven't already gotten me something, because I know that I always ask for gifts like last minute because I never know what I want.
Right.
I'll be honest with you. I'm so unsure of anything that I want for a gift. It's always like the day before I go, I guess this thing maybe. And so I was like, hey, I really want this game. So when I came home for my birthday weekend, that game was there waiting for me. Basically, close to about a full year after the game came out. But I did get Mass Effect 3, basically the day that it came out. I did get that one right away.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when games kind of come out of nowhere. Like because we've told our origin story, as it were, about how we discovered the game. And like for me, it wasn't on my radar at all until I played it at a friend's house, and he like badgered me. He's like, "Oh, just play it. You'll love it. Just play it." And then I fell in love with the game. But before that, I was like, Mass Effect? What the hell is this? Another game with guns? Who cares?
I didn't like playing video games because
That's
my
true.
dad was a jerk about it.
But I taught you better. I gave you the access you always needed.
Gross.
Sorry.
But you are right though. Like it really does. I mean, especially from the artwork and everything else like that's out there. It really is just sort of like, okay, a game with guns. Like what else? What else do you have? And Mass Effect is also a very interesting game series because basically nothing is the same gameplay wise between 1, 2, 3, or even Andromeda.
Right.
They just constantly are like, hey, remember all those mechanics you once knew? Throw those out the window. And I don't know. I know a lot of people have complaints about Mass Effect 3 with the ending, but truthfully, I mean, like, I kind of think that might be my favorite one. Maybe it's just because it comes to an end, and so it's like, I understand that some people had issues with some of the endings there, but like in a way, I did think that it had a satisfying ending, or at least answers that Shepard would have accepted, with the exception of walking away. That was the only one that I was kind of like, I don't know if I believe that one.
Yeah, I mean, well, for me, I always fight and argue when people want to go, oh, the third one wasn't as good. I'm like, the whole damn game is the ending. Like, the whole game is wrapping up every story that came before. So if you don't like literally the last 15 minutes, go to hell. Because the whole game is a love letter to the rest of the series.
My actual only complaint about Mass Effect 3 is the fact that Grunt is not a companion.
Yeah, agreed.
That's like the only thing that I was ever like, you know what I hated? Not having Grunt. Don't get me wrong. If you save Urdnot Rex, that's great. And having Rex back is kind of nice. But I got to admit, I've really got along with Grunt so much better. And I was like, man, having Garrus and Grunt back by my side for this last mission would have been so nice.
Yeah.
But no, I couldn't have nice things.
Aw, I love Grunt.
Yeah, I call him my lizard son.
He's everyone's lizard son.
It's true. He is.
He's such an misunderstood teenage boy.
Right?
And
exactly.
I love it.
Yeah, how can you not?
It's not a phase, you know?
Well, that leads us into my next talking point, which is about the characters of Mass Effect. So, focusing on just Mass Effect 1, if you had to choose one character as your favorite, who would you pick?
Honestly, Garrus.
Shocking.
Everybody loves Garrus.
I know that that's probably not, a shocking thing at all, like for anybody, but I feel like part of that is just because I'm not saying that other characters aren't written well.
Right.
Of course not.
But I feel like there was something that they tapped into with Garrus that they got right away.
Yeah.
And the fact that he is, he's one of two characters that you can have by your side in all three games. Wait, right? It's just him and Tali, right?
Yeah.
They've been by your side in every game, yeah.
Right, yeah. All of a sudden I suddenly was like, wait, is there a third character that I just never used that I'm suddenly forgetting?
I mean, do we count Joker?
I mean, yeah, but he's not in your party.
Yeah. Like I wouldn't count Joker only on the sense of like when I go down to like fight people, like Joker's not like by my side.
Yeah.
Right.
But and also like in a way it's also like conflicting because it's like the Normandy itself isn't really always by your side because you have three different versions of that ship as well.
Yeah.
But I gotta say they really did make the ship better every time. That was the one thing that I do think that they changed every time that like I was like, all right, now we're talking. Like the layout between 1 and 2 was significant.
Yeah.
And God, it was a nightmare to travel around that ship. I almost called it a boat. But yeah, no, sorry. Getting back to your original question though, Garrus, and I think part of it is just because there were a lot of things that, especially during the time that I first played that game, this is going to sound so sad and almost depressing, and I apologize. But Garrus kind of gave me a feel of like the type of friendship that I was currently missing. Like I was going through a lot of changes in life at that time. One of the big things being like right after I started playing those games, I did leave the college that I was initially at. A lot of the friends that I went to high school with that I used to be inseparable with, who were like, we're never going to stop being best friends. Like, we just kind of stopped talking, and I was like, what happened?
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things where it's like, I felt like I didn't have a best friend. I didn't have like I don't want to call Garrus a sidekick, but I mean, like, unfortunately, when you do have a character that is sort of like, it's his destiny to fix the world, or her, right? You know, depending on if you, how you play Shepard. But it was one of those things where it's like he kind of was like your number one sidekick in a way, your main, your right hand Turian. I was gonna say man, but I was like that's not accurate. And so I was like, yeah, you know what? This is what I need in my next best friendship. So like Garrus gave me that gift.
Well, I mean, I would say Garrus is definitely the closest we get in this game to an everyman. Like Shepard can do no wrong in like the eyes of the people who love him or her.
That's
like,
fair, yeah.
Is gung-ho and like the hero. But like, you know, and then like Ashley's got a bit of an attitude in the beginning. You know, Caden is very reserved. Tali is very obsessive with, you know, the ship and stuff. Rex is Rex. And so like, I feel like Garrus is the only character that really does feel like another kind of just a guy hanging out. Like he's got a ton of backstory, but personality-wise, he just seems very average Joe, and I think that's really relatable.
That is actually a very good point. And like, not that he doesn't go through some character development himself, because he always had kind of like a chip on his shoulder. Mm-hmm. Sorry, all right.
No worries.
He always had a chip on his shoulder, but I feel as if he was sort of always a lot more down to earth and didn't really have his head up his ass like some of them did.
Yes.
And like, you know, again, I love other characters. Like I do actually really like Tali, which is like interesting because I don't know, maybe that's another talking point, but I feel like sometimes there is some, when people kind of equate characters to different types of people that you would meet in your everyday life, there's sometimes some kind of really kind of racist standpoints that I've had from some people on Tali, and I'm kind of like, okay, I don't need that kind of negativity. But Tali, I think, like, had this really interesting thing of she had a really cool character growth in the sense of, like, she really thought that everything that she was brought up to believe was fact, but getting out there into the universe and, you know, being in a sort of melting pot of species sort of made her realize, oh, everything is not always what is written down as law, basically. And I really appreciated her growth and like seeing a character from the Quarians who were very much like anti-synthetic life embrace a character like Legion. Yeah. You're kind of like, yeah, that's rad. I like that.
Yeah, the second game, like it's funny, I don't really love Tali in the first game. I feel like the most recent playthrough, my kind of blank slate, kind of boring feelings I used to have for Caden kind of landed on her. And I think it's maybe just because I didn't interact with her enough. Because sometimes it comes down to that. But I feel like in the second game, when you run into her leading her own team, you know, not a ton of spoilers, but like she's on her own when you run into her because you've been separated. She seems so much more empowered, in control, and like really herself.
Well, as we said, pretty much all of our characters from Mass Effect 1 go through something traumatic between 1 and 2. So they have all changed in a way.
Yeah, and you know, I also think that a lot of the times one of the big things for characters like Tali in any kind of like franchise that has multiple pieces, sometimes there isn't like in the first game, I have before done a run through where I tried to interact with her more and felt like I didn't get much. But I feel like what it is that they knew that they had to introduce her then so that it would make way more sense for her journey in the second part. So I feel like there wasn't a lot for her in Mass Effect 1. It was just sort of like the groundwork for this larger story for her further down the line. And I think that did make me then later appreciate her a little bit more in 1, because I was like, oh, you're going to go through so many changes.
You're going to suffer so much.
So much.
Oh, you're going to hurt so bad.
I love Tally. Just her optimism and her idealism.
Yeah.
Her determination to do the right thing. I admire that. And I
Me
think
too.
that's why I have such positivity towards her, because she is the kind of friend that I have in many of my friends. Many of my friends are like this, and that's why I value her so much.
Amen. If this was like slam poetry, I would be,
There you go. Yeah, all the snaps,
Snapping.
right? Snaps.
All the
That's
snaps.
still a thing? Do the kids still say snaps? I don't know.
I really don't know.
Me neither.
I worry about
All right,
you.
let's talk favorite mission, which is sometimes hard to choose in the first game, I feel like.
God.
Because the first game, and we've talked about this before on previous episodes, it doesn't really take your hand that hard in the first game. The major story moments do. But like the smaller missions, you really have to get into the nitty-gritty of it on your own.
It more like kicks you out of the airlock.
Right, and then goes, bye. But if you have a favorite moment or mission in Mass Effect 1, what would that be?
That's really tough. I feel like one of the big differences that between Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2 was the introduction of things like loyalty missions.
Yeah.
And that was something that I definitely, like, once that happened in 2 and then subsequently in 3, I feel like every time I have gone back to play back through 1, I always feel like there's something missing. But with 1, this is tough. I feel like, okay, what is okay, hang on. I'm blanking on the name of the planet.
Okay.
I'm going to look it up real quick. No, not that thing. And this, I realize that you think I'm talking about Star Wars Google, but I'm not.
No, Star
Here we
Wars.
go. Novaria. I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
Novaria had some of the most satisfying, like, content in it.
Yeah.
Not that, like, the mission where you have to kind of make the decision of, making Rex stand down and everything like that, like, where you either lose Caden or Ashley.
Wait, are you talking Vermeer?
Yeah. In Vermeer, like,
Okay.
I'm not saying that isn't a impactful mission, or not that that's
Right.
not an important mission, but Novaria, I feel like there is a lot more variation, I guess you could say, between the different types of missions that you do there. Like, there's a little bit of corporate espionage going on in some of the stuff. I mean, I guess maybe that's cheating, because I'm now talking about multiple missions, just one planet.
That's all right.
But I am nothing if not. Now I can't even think of the word that I'm trying to think of. But I was saying it earlier, right? Like with Christmas gifts or birthday gifts, I never know what I want, so I'll always take the easy way out. Novaria, though, was just really fascinating to me. There was a lot of stuff, and this is why I think that Google thought that I was thinking of Star Wars. I think there is some stuff to kind of compare to Hoth from Star Wars. But there's a lot of really interesting little bits here and there throughout Novaria, between like the smuggling and taking down the matriarch.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of really cool stuff there, and yes, it does make you do that thing where you run around, you go from this spot, then you have to go back and you talk to this person, then you go talk to that person, and sometimes that gets a little obnoxious as opposed to just going through kind of like a dungeon crawl in a way. But I just really, really enjoyed everything that Novaria had to offer me. So that, I think, is my answer.
Sure.
Because And I'm sure that you're like, man, just give me one solid answer.
No,
No, Planet is fine. Our friend Josh loves everything that happens on Novaria as well. So.
Yeah. I mean, you're
not alone.
It's MJ's least favorite planet because she doesn't like space cockroaches.
Makes me feel icky.
Whereas I don't mind the Rachni. The Rachni were super scary to me the first time I played because I had no idea there was going to be something. There was going to be horror elements, which is what that planet really starts out as.
Yes, that's very true. I mean, it's also scary because, I feel like it's not so much that there aren't consequences, but it's like that's the first time where you're really not facing something that is just sort of another guy out to get you.
Yeah.
Like there's other people, like in other situations, you might be able to be in a situation where if you have enough points in certain aspects, you can talk your way out of it or change the outcome of a conversation or fight. But in this, it's like there's no reasoning. It's just like you go in guns blazing because they're coming after you.
Yeah.
And they really do just like they sometimes come in swarms and it can get overwhelming and like. I mean, I've definitely before played through some of those missions and been like, oh my God, please. And been like trying to run and just, there's nowhere to go.
Following up with your favorite mission, now we want to talk about who's your gang, who's your crew. In the first Mass Effect game, who were the two people you took on most of your missions? Now, on the most recent playthroughs that we talked about for the first season of the show, I varied it up on purpose, knowing a little bit of the meta of that I just wanted to try and get to know the more characters and like get to become friendlier. But about halfway through the game, I ended up leaning on Caden and Garrus because they became my favorites. But do you have a core team that you like to use in the first game?
Sort of. God, see, I did it again. No, but the thing is, like, because I have done so many different playthroughs, and I try to use different setups, like for Shepard specifically.
Right.
Mostly because, if you're playing it on Xbox, there's achievements, and you're like, oh, I really want to get all those achievements. So, I'll go through and, I'll try to use all the different tech moves or, and try and get through every possible scenario. And I feel like I always try to make my team balance me off, basically. But that being said, I almost always have Garrus by my side the entire time.
Yeah.
And I feel like part of that is because I feel like AI was way stronger in Garrus. I feel like he didn't die nearly as often as other people and didn't seem to, like, miss. And part of that is probably just he is a literal marksman. Depending on the playthrough, I would say I either leaned on my second character, though, would almost always be either Rex or Liara. Mm-hmm. I really like Liara as well. She's a very interesting character to me. She just, I feel like, is one of the health-wise weakest links in the party.
Yeah, that's fair. I see that.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense to me, too.
Hardly took her with me.
Like, she's very powerful, but I feel like I had to use Metagel on her just, like, way more than I ever had to use it on anyone else.
Well, also like, as we've talked already a little bit, like, and we're not going too deep into 2 and 3, but 2 and 3 had a much more focused gear system, whereas in the first game, it's kind of like, you can do whatever you want, and to that degree, if you miss armor or, like, you don't get certain armor, because, like, it's not like another RPG where everyone can wear everyone else's armor.
Oh, yes.
There were Krogan only armor, Asari only armor, then there was heavy and light armor.
Asari got human armor.
Oh, Asari did get human armor.
Yeah.
But there was light armor and heavy armor and like...
Yeah. So that kind of drove me crazy, honestly, because it was way too many things to be keeping track of.
It was so much micromanaging.
Yeah.
You're all adults. Buy your own armor.
On that point, do you have a least favorite thing about the first game? Like, is there something that you really don't like about the first game besides the Mako? Because that's too easy of an answer.
And it's Matt's answer.
And it is my answer.
I mean, it is kind of. I mean, honestly, almost. It is an attachment to the Mako. I think it's anything that. I feel like, again, in order to get achievements, you had to do all sorts of crazy little side missions and all these other things. And I just really hated. It's really weird. Like in other games, like for example, like Fallout or Skyrim or even a game like Mass Effect Andromeda, right? I love exploration in every other game. Mass Effect 1, though, had the most angering exploration, but also side mission stuff. Like any kind of mission that I ever got on a planet that wasn't a main mission drove me nuts. Because I feel like it was so hard to take out turrets. And, like, yes, part of that is related to the Mako, but, like, even sometimes I would get out of the Mako and try and snipe down the side of a mountain. But it's like, it took you so long. And then, especially if you're trying to get the Insanity playthrough. Yeah, like, there are some missions there that would take me hours. And that's not, like, because I would keep dying. It's just, like, I had to go so slowly to keep myself alive. And it was to the point where I was like, is this worth it? Is this insanity because it's going to cost me mine?
Well, also, Mass Effect 1 was was on the earlier side of autosaving. Like, autosaving just became a really big thing.
Right.
And so it didn't autosave very frequently. Like, when you exited a place, entered a place, but that was about it. And so, like, nothing was more frustrating than playing Insanity, doing most of a mission and then dying at the end and having to start at the back if you forgot to save. I think what broke me when I played Insanity the first time is trying to do the side mission where, like, the rogue AI has all the rocket turrets controlled.
Yes.
Like, yes. I died so much on that mission. To the point where, like, I don't even think I went near that mission on this playthrough for the show because I just had such horrible memories of trying to get through that thing on Insanity.
And, now that you say that reminds me, could you actually, now that I'm thinking back on it, I don't think you could take cover in the first game, could you?
You could,
yes,
but it wasn't
as good.
Yeah, you could take cover if you were near cover and you could run to it, but it wasn't as fluid as 2 and 3 was. Like,
but it was almost predominantly like pillars kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like you couldn't do it off of like because I was thinking about doing the things like the mountain stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like all I could ever do was like take a couple steps forward, shoot, and then take a couple steps back. Because there was nowhere to... you couldn't, like, hide on a hill.
No, you couldn't.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
And some surfaces didn't really let you hide either. Like, it was really kind of finicky. It wasn't as tight as the second and third game, which you could pretty much use anything as cover in those games. Right. And I think in the third game you can create your own cover or something. I don't remember.
I don't
it's
think
been a
that's
while.
accurate.
No, is that not? It's been a while.
I don't think so.
But yeah, no, I agree. I think trying to be tactical in the first game was definitely much harder.
So, Mass Effect has been a huge influence over both me and Matt. See this podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you feel that Mass Effect has had a tangible influence in your life?
Yes. Maybe not necessarily in a physical capacity, but certainly in a mental capacity. I definitely grew up in an area that is a lot more melting pot and a lot more diverse. And so seeing a game like Mass Effect definitely felt normal. And so when you would come across... throughout any of the games, you would come across, at least once per game, some sort of character that was, I guess they would call it like speciesist. I don't know. Because I guess that would be somewhat different than considering them races. But it's one of those things where like that sort of thing always, and I understood the reason for it, right, was to kind of also give you the Paragon or the Renegade aspect a little bit, if you could interact with them. But that's the sort of thing that always kind of made me like, man, it sucks that even in like a futuristic world, there is still stuff like that. And seeing a lead role hero be able to roll throughout the universe with a extremely diverse team and also always stand up for them was very satisfying. And I feel like, sometimes I hear some guff about that on like places like Twitter, but it's always like neckbeard guides and like not people that you really want to be associating with anyway.
Sure.
But I've always felt like diversity was a very important thing to Mass Effect. Mm-hmm. And that is something that I feel like I carried throughout my life as well. And so even though that was something that had been there before, I feel like it just sort of amplified it. And so it was one of those things where I do my best to not look for everyone that is exactly like me. Because I feel like, you get a lot more done when you have multiple voices at the table because everybody brings something different. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about Mass Effect is when you have going into different missions with different people and hearing the interactions between people and hearing like the different ideas or their different takes on the missions. That sort of thing I think was always a very interesting mechanic to me, and I think very cool because it shows that they recorded just an incredible amount of lines and some lines that some people will probably never hear. And so I feel like that was a big thing for me. And on the other side of it, I feel like it really gave me this unfortunate idea that Mass Effect should be a game that just continues to be made all the time. And it makes me mad that a game like Madden comes out every year with a new game, and yet Mass Effect doesn't get that kind of support. And I'm like, hey, why?
Well, I mean, part of that is because quality of Madden versus the quality of most of the Mass Effect games. Like, there's a reason.
I mean, and that's fair. I mean, I'm not saying give me a new Mass Effect every single year, but I just think it's one of those things where it's like, with football, you can afford to just give a patch every couple of years and then put out a new game every 3 to 4 years. Like, we don't need Madden 19 as well as Madden 20 and then Madden 21. Like, that's just a lot there, guy. I could really use though more support for interesting stories like Mass Effect and having a new game come out, even if it's every 4 years. I feel like that's not a lot to ask. That's the same amount of time between Olympics.
Yeah, I think EA has made it pretty clear that they are divided on what they're going to do with their properties, considering we're not getting the next Dragon Age until 2020, and after the failure of Andromeda, although I feel like it's still sold fairly well, it just had horrible buzz because people hated it. They won't release
the numbers.
I have so many feelings about Andromeda, so like hopefully someday I can come back to talk about that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We will definitely do that. I have not played it yet. I will probably play it for the show.
Yes, we're trying to keep him spoiler free.
But
this is not a spoiler. It's just like a matter of like Andromeda had so much potential, and I just feel like I don't know if it's that we have certain things in our mind because we got so hooked on Shepard and his gang or her gang, or what it is, but like there is something that is definitely like missing from it, and like I feel like everyone has different ideas on it, but like Andromeda is still a pretty good game, and I feel like the people that shit on it endlessly. Sorry, can I cuss on this show? I don't feel like I ever asked. Okay, cool. Yeah. I also was like, wait, is that the first time I've even cussed? Oh no, I don't even know. But yeah, it's just like people shit on that game endlessly sometimes. And I'm like, hey, did you play the whole game? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, well then it clearly wasn't that bad. Because you played the whole thing.
Yeah, I didn't play it because it just came out at the same time as The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And that was like a no-brainer for me. But that said, I do want to play it. And I think, honestly, with a series like Mass Effect, Andromeda was never going to live up to the trilogy, ever. Yeah. It just wasn't going to happen. No one was going to be satisfied. And I think it's why BioWare took this hard shift into working on Anthem, because with the success of Destiny and Destiny 2 and other online shooting games, they thought they could tell a good story in that space and wanted to try something different. And so I totally get that. Like, I also wouldn't have been surprised if Anthem started out as a Mass Effect online perpetual game that after Andromeda didn't do so well, they shifted away from. Because it's not that hard to believe that this space mech shooter game could have been a Mass Effect mech space shooter game. But
I just wish that they would make games, like if you're going to make an MMORPG, can you make it so that you can play it without other people?
Yeah.
Like, give me a single player version of the game, because I hate the general. This sounds so bad, but like I do hate general public, like anyone's online at any time. That was the thing that I think I hated the most about like Destiny.
Yeah.
Just because I was kind of like, yeah, dude, I see you doing a dance over there. Like I really can't be bothered. That being said, I also loved Fallout 76 despite it having that mechanic. And I feel like maybe it's because by the time I actually really played it, most people stopped. I never really see anybody. It's like I could play for 6 hours and see maybe 2 people. And it's like, all right, that's not too bad.
I will say that that's definitely the most positive review of that game I've ever heard. So there it is. I think
Fallout, I can do this super quick. I can do this probably in like 30 seconds or less. Fallout 76 is a good game only on the standpoint of if you're really into backstory on things. It's something that I think Fallout has always done well is leaving behind things like journals and entry points on computers or holotapes to flesh out the world. And that's essentially all that this game is. Like, all the storytelling is done through you just kind of doing missions. There is no branching story, which is something that I miss, but I think it's harder to do if you're going to have it be everybody's online together. But it really does explain so much that we've never known about the Fallout universe, because we've never played a game this early on in the Fallout universe. So, I don't know. I think it's really, really cool because it does such a huge deep dive on the lore, and like that's really fascinating to me. And it's got a really good exploration mechanic. So, as we all know, that's something that I enjoy. So there you go. That's probably more like a minute rather than 30 seconds, but
it's fine. Totally okay.
That's my pitch.
But yeah, no, going back to Mass Effect as a series, like I think we all want more games, but I just don't know that they'll go back to it at this point. I mean, how I see it now at this point is now that they have Anthem, BioWare, and if Anthem is a huge success, which it's scoped out to be, there's a lot of interest in it. We may not. That's definitely why we're not getting a Dragon Age game for another year, is because Anthem is the focus. But who knows? Anything can change. And I'm conflicted. Like, I would love another game with Shepard in it, but I also feel like I don't know that I could go back to Shepard after it being definitively over.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't want to go back to Shepard. Like, as much as I loved that first trilogy, it's a lot like when they say, "Hey, we're done with this movie series," and then 25 years later they get the whole crowd back together. Yeah. They're like, "Just kidding, one last run," and you're like, "No, you guys aren't teenagers anymore. You're in your 50s. Like, this is a little embarrassing in a way." But like, I really do think that Andromeda, like, once you play it, I would like to think that you'll agree with this point of like, I think they set up an Andromeda 2 pretty well.
Yeah.
Of leaving of like a very open space for, hey, like, yes, we definitely wrapped up this bit of it, but there's these many potential things that you could get into. Yeah. And I really feel like I was like, oh, they really did a good job of doing that, as opposed to being like, and now it's over. See you never.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played Andromeda yet, but like, the thing I really want in the Mass Effect universe is I want Skyrim in space. But what I mean by that is I don't want to be a human anymore in Mass Effect. There's so many really cool races that they made that they need to do something that like Skyrim did, where you pick your race at the beginning, like, start a new game with a new storyline and have all the story depend on your personality, but not your race. Because
I feel like that's what Andromeda 2 could easily do, because they really, really set up the idea of like, all of us are now in this, new universe together. And it's like, it, unfortunately, just like the original trilogy, they do put a lot on humans and humanity.
Right.
But like after that point, you don't have to. It's like we are in a Andromeda sets up a quite literal clean slate, basically.
Right.
And I feel like you could like the whole new Andromeda galaxy is your canvas, and you could be whatever you wanted to be. And I feel like that would be so incredible.
Yeah.
I'd love it if they went kind of the Dragon Age route where when you pick your race, it gives you this unique origin start.
Sure.
So
Yes.
you're experiencing some aspect of that decision, and then it kind of draws you into the main story. That's one thing Dragon Age did that I really liked.
Well, yeah, ideally that's better, but I mentioned the way I did only because that's the easy way out. Like, Skyrim starts the way it starts because then you can literally be anyone.
Yeah.
But
Right.
that other way obviously would be best. But we'll see. I mean, you know, games take longer to make, and the thing is when BioWare takes their time with something, we get really high quality stuff, which was the first 3 games. You know, I think part of the reason Andromeda failed, among other reasons, is there were game-breaking bugs at launch, and, you know, that ruins the experience. Like, if you're playing the game and it crashes and you lose everything, you're not going to like that game, no matter what advances they've put in it. And so I think that that's what they're trying to accomplish with Anthem, and if Anthem is successful, it will empower them to go back to Dragon Age and then hopefully back to Mass Effect. But we'll see.
This may be a question that's too big to answer in one episode.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this is, I feel like, an issue for not just this game, though. I feel like I've heard of this more in the last, let's say, 4 years than I have any other time in my life. Of when a game first comes out, it immediately needs a patch, or there's all sorts
Yeah.
of issues and people have to fix it. I mean, I understand that there are people on the internet who just write just absolutely horrific things on Twitter, especially to companies and stuff like that. But it's like, why don't companies just do more things like, hey, we're really sorry, we've got to push this back. Only because this game is not ready, we want to give you guys the best possible thing at like when it's ready to go. Because I feel like I would much rather wait even a full year for a game to come out. Like, let's say Andromeda 2 is going to come out this year, right? I know that'd be way too soon, and maybe that's the point. But if they said, hey, this is supposed to come out on, you know, the end of February of 2019, I think it's going to have to be end of February 2020, y'all. Like, there's so many broken things here. I would be like, you know what? Thank you. Thank you for taking that time.
Well, yeah, I've always felt that way. Like, when people would get pissed every time inevitably a Zelda game would get pushed back, because I love Miyamoto, but that's what happens. It's just water's blue, the sky's blue, they push back Zelda games. But every time they do it, the game comes out and it's phenomenal. And
Right.
I think pushing back games, while frustrating as a consumer, makes sense as a developer, because you want to put out the best thing you can. But because everything's on the internet all the time now, and everything can be patched, I feel a lot of developers are like, we'll fix it in post. And, you know, they want to get the money and the purchase before they can worry about fixing it.
Quality control is like a big concern, I feel like.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just so weird. I feel like no one can ever make up their mind. It's like, okay, well, what do you want? Do you want your game now, or do you want it to be perfect? They're like, well, I want
Right.
both. And it's like, you might not always get both.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. Well, Colin, this has been a wonderful chat. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
What are you doing?
What am I doing?
I don't know what you're doing.
I'm thanking
It sounds
him for
like
being
you're
on the
like
show.
ending the show.
I'm not ending the
show's
show.
not over.
The show's not over. I'm thanking him for coming on the show, and I wanted to dive a little deeper. See, it would be fine and would have been a good segue if you hadn't interrupted me.
Well, I am not in your head.
That's true.
Your head is a scary place, and I don't want to live there.
It's true.
But you talk like, and now we've reached the end of our program.
I did
and
not.
it's time for us to say goodbye.
But I didn't say any
well,
of those
I'll
things.
see you guys
No,
later.
no.
No, Colin,
Thanks for
say.
having me, and I hope that I can come back again sometime
Colin,
soon.
don't leave us.
Yeah.
Insult all the neckbeards and everything else like that, and all the people that I offended about things like diversity and everything
Yes.
like that.
Before we wrap up, of course, and before
Yes.
we get to the close of the show, we had asked you to bring something for our fandom corner. And,
Yes.
and we had previously discussed that you may or may not have something. Well, do you have something you'd like to share that you'd
I
like to
do.
highlight about the fandom?
these aren't exactly fan theories, but these are kind of like fan wants,
Okay.
right?
All right, we had
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
We had that before.
So there are two things in this world that I really want. That one of them is an absolute Mass Effect thing, and the other one is like Mass Effect adjacent.
Okay.
Sorry, my allergies have been killing me recently.
No worries.
That'll be fun for you to edit and have to listen to that audio hell.
Stop that.
You assume a lot about my editing, but that's fine.
So one of the big things that I want is, if you're not familiar with myself, dear listener, and what it is that I do, one of the big shows, there we go, that's what I was looking for. One of the big shows that I work on is a show called Myth Takes, which is a Monster of the Week actual play game that has a rotating cast of cast members from the Scavengers Network, which is the network that I am the president and owner of, and it has a whole bunch of really great shows on it, but we take most of the cast members from those shows and we put them on this show. And so I have really grown to love tabletop role-playing games. I feel like I definitely liked them before I started doing that show, but then once I started doing that, I wanted to do every tabletop role-playing game that could possibly exist in podcast form. And there was a day where I was going through Andromeda, and I was like, hey, how has there not been a majorly produced Mass Effect tabletop role-playing game? Like, something real big. Because, like, man, you want to talk about, like, okay, if you're not sure what a tabletop role-playing game is, think Dungeons and Dragons. And I understand that some people are like, Dungeons and Dragons, that's for nerds. But
First of all, if anyone listening to this show says that, what are you doing?
Yeah, why are you listening to us?
it's like, yeah, I mean, I get that, and yes, it is, but aren't we all nerds in some way? But the thing is that in a game like D&D, you have to deal with all the different qualities and what are the strengths and weaknesses of different races, or species, rather. So wouldn't a game like Mass Effect be really good for something like that? You have different types of weaponry, you have different types of armor, you have different races that have different qualities. Like playing a human, let's say human infiltrator would easily be a totally different experience than a Krogan soldier. Mm. And I feel like, how has this not been created? Unless it has been and no one has brought it to my attention, in which case, if you know me and have not brought it to my attention, how dare you? But it's like one of those things where it's like, that's what I want. Like, if you're not going to give me another Mass Effect game, give me the ability to essentially make my own. Because I don't want my adventures in the Mass Effect realm to end.
So we have kind of good news for you, Colin.
Does that exist?
It doesn't, I think, exist exactly the way you're describing, but we're going to actually be doing a one-shot RPG using one of the Powered by the Apocalypse games.
Oh, dude, Powered by the Apocalypse is the way to go.
Yeah. So it's going to be hosted by our dear friend, David Boyle. And Matt and I are going to be playing in it along with two of our other friends. And if it does well, we'll be doing it again and inviting other people on to play with us.
Yeah, it's not... It's like, I understand what you're saying. I would love for BioWare to release an official tabletop guide
that would
playing
be
Mass
amazing.
Effect. Absolutely, and that does not exist as far as I know. But there are tons of different homebrew versions of it in multiple different play styles. And so, if you do some research, you might find one that you really like. But yeah, there's no official BioWare and Wizards of the Coast presents Mass Effect Player's Guide and Monster Manual. Like, there's none of that. And I hope someday we do get that. Because I agree. I think it'd be a fun and perfect world to play in. There's tons of ways to balance it. It could work. I mean, there are Pathfinder and D20 Modern campaigns that you could probably turn into Mass Effect. I'm sure people have done already. So I'm right there with you. I think if BioWare ever released an official tabletop version of Mass Effect, I'd be all over it.
Yeah. But for now, we have what we have. And if what we have does well, then hey, Colin, do you want to play with us?
Oh, absolutely. And BioWare, I know that you listen to the show. I know you're a big-time fan of the show here, of Reignite. We really do appreciate your patronage. Listen, hey, hit us up on how we can make this like an official, like, big game thing that I could walk into any game store and be like, yes, hi, I'd like the Mass Effect book. And they'll go, here you go. That would be lovely. And I appreciate your time. I will take my answer for that one off the air. Mostly because they're not on this call. But
no.
you get my point. Thank you. Thank you again.
Of course.
Okay, so I can be quicker on the second one. But the other thing that I would want is, hypothetically, just like I was saying with like wanting a tabletop role-playing game, if BioWare is like, hey, listen, we're not coming back to this, right? I would say, first off, well, fuck you. Like, how dare you do this to me, get me hooked, and then just leave. But there's another game series that ended a lot longer, like a long time ago, rather, that I wish had continued. And that game series is a little game called Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic.
Knights of the
Old Republic, sorry. And I would love a Knights of the Old Republic game in the gameplay style of Mass Effect.
Yeah.
And even kind of taking it a step further, doing it in the exact same way that we were discussing with other things, because you always have to play human in those as well. Give me another alien to play.
Yeah.
Give me the ability to be the rogue or the, like the little scrapper guy, Let me be Han Solo rather than a guy with a lightsaber. Although I do understand the point of like, if you can have a lightsaber, why would you be anybody else? But still, I feel like give me a game like that. That is where I feel like if there was a way to marry the Mass Effect world and the Star Wars world and not have it have to be an MMORPG.
I was just going to say.
So that I don't have to deal with the general public. I would be the happiest Colin Parker that could possibly be. Let that be this timeline, and don't let this be the timeline that Luigi forgot.
Yeah, I am one of the few who liked the Old Republic, but yeah, it's not Knights of the Old Republic. It's a different game, same universe, but it's definitely a different game. I would love an updated Knights of the Old Republic. I would also take a sequel to Jade Empire, which I've still not played, but I hear is amazing, and I would take a sequel or a remake.
I actually have not played that either.
I've heard good things.
I've heard less about that one, but I don't know if that's just because of like it wasn't popular like in this area or what.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, like, it's crazy to me that I have, some of the higher ended gameplay systems, and I built a PC so I could play all these fancy games, and yet sometimes on like a Friday night, it'll be like, oh, what's Colin Parker playing on Steam? Oh, Knights of the Old Republic 2. And I'm like, yep, it's my 5th playthrough, doing the exact same thing. What's up?
Yeah, that's pretty much me with Skyrim, although I took a break for a while. I'm playing it again. But there was a time where it's like, oh, Matt's online. Oh, he's playing Skyrim.
Well,
okay.
This time you're doing it for work.
I am doing it for finger quotes work. But yeah, no, I handily agree with that, Colin. I think that the first two Knights of the Old Republic games are fantastic, and I would love a third game in the series. That I would assume is more difficult only because, of course, the Star Wars license now being owned by the mouse probably is more difficult to get.
Darn that mouse.
But EA and BioWare have worked together before.
Yes.
And EA has the Star Wars franchise.
That's true. And they
for video
work
games.
With BioWare. BioWare is one of their developers, so yeah.
Right. So that could and the thing is, the second you said that, I was like, oh yeah, that's true. But then all of a sudden, those two buttons just clicked in my head. So maybe just maybe, I'm not down and out just yet. And this also brings up one last good point. I would love a game that is all about Garrus in the 2 years that we didn't see him.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
I'd also like a book or a graphic novel.
I'd take that, too.
That would also be good. Yeah. I would take that too.
Yeah.
I just feel like I really enjoy the voice acting for Garrus.
Oh, of course.
Like,
he's great.
You know, I mean, I think that they've always done a good job of finding very solid actors for that game series. Mm-hmm. But Garrus always has some of the more, just like, I don't know, just some of the more stronger talking points, I guess, is how you would maybe word it. Not talking points. That doesn't make any sense, Colin. But like the better like performances, rather, I guess, is probably the best.
He had some real good lines. Like some of his quotes made it into my wedding vows.
Yeah, and I believe that was Brandon Keener. I think.
Yes. Correct.
Eternal crush on him.
Yeah, and like he's done other things, but it's like I feel like nothing will ever beat Garrus.
Yeah, he's a very talented character actor who's been tons of stuff. He shows up on crime dramas all the time. He was actually in L.A. Noire, which was a photorealistic video game.
Oh, that's right.
And when he appeared, I wasn't familiar with his actual face, but heard his voice and went, "That's Garrus."
You're like, wait a minute,
but you don't look like that.
You don't look. Yeah, you're supposed to be uglier. What happened?
You're supposed to have a scar.
And that does bring up a very, very tiny point of conversation. I know we're talking about Mass Effect 1 here, but I did appreciate that in Mass Effect 3, Buzz Aldrin did a very, very small bit cameo for voice acting.
Yeah.
That made me very happy.
Sure.
He's just a stargazer, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Buzz Aldrin was great because he was famous for telling really bad jokes about the moon and then like finishing it up with, you had to be there.
That's good.
Sounds like something.
And that's what I want to be like when I grow up.
There you go.
Oh, well, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My phone is always open if you need me again.
So, before you go, let us know exactly where you can be found on your corner of the internet.
Okay, if you want to find me specifically, you can find me at Colin M. Parker. That is ColinMParker. If you want to find all the different projects that I work on, we tweet about them all the time at Scavengersnet. Sorry, on Twitter and our Instagram, which we don't use as much because most of our stuff is audio-based, but it's at Scavengers Network on Instagram, Scavengersnet on Twitter, and Myth Takes, which is kind of like the largest show that I work on, at least for right now. That show is at Myth Takes Cast. But I do work with a lot of really great people, and one of my favorite things about the Scavengers Network is that even if there are people that are not on the network, we still work with them all the time, because all of us met through the group that you were mentioning earlier, the Bim Bambino Podcasters Facebook group. That's where everyone on our network met. So, we have a really strong friendship with a lot of folks there, and so, we do ads for podcasts that are not on our network all the time because we really want to help get the word out on a lot of these shows that we believe in and adore very much.
Awesome. Colin bringing up Scavengers Network reminds me that we have our own network, Certain Point of View, which you can find online at certainpov.com. It has a brand new shiny website.
A brand new shiny website that MJ made, which is awesome.
Make it. I just made it look nice.
Well, you designed it.
I just made it look nice. So you can see Reignite there at certainpov.com/reignite. Definitely check it out. Let us know what you think. A reminder that we're going to be at Dark Side of the Con.
Yes. The last weekend in March, I believe, is when that is happening. We are doing a panel podcast about vampires and video games. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of vampires and video games across many generations and consoles, and then we're going to finish up the talk with our experience taking two branching paths in the Dawn Guard DLC in Skyrim, talking about how our choices matter in that, and then, of course, a Q&A after. Please come and hang out. It's going to be a lot of fun. Maybe if you guys are behaved, we'll talk a little bit about upcoming stuff for Reignite as well.
March 29th to 31st in Parsippany, New Jersey at Sheridan Parsippany Hotel. Tickets are still available.
You can also join our Discord channel, which is the Certain POV Discord channel. There's a direct link to it from the Certain Point of View website. We have channels dedicated to all of the podcasts under the network. Reignites happens to be one of the more active ones. We talk a lot about current gaming, Mass Effect specifically, other nerdy things as well. So come hang out and chat with us there. And then, of course, you can follow us across the multiverse at Reignite Pod on Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, and wherever else your heart desires. Facebook. Our email address is at reignitepod@gmail.com.
Not at reignitepod@gmail.com, just reignitepod@gmail.com.
It's fine. We're fine. It's fine. Of course, if you're listening and you have not yet written us a quick review on iTunes, Facebook, or your podcast listening device of choice, please do. It helps us to get seen and featured. We just want to share this show with as many people as possible because we are passionate about what we do here and would love to engage more passionate listeners as well. I think that's it. I think that's all our pitches.
I think that's everything.
Colin, thank you again for joining us. It was a pleasure having you on the show.
The pleasure was all mine. Thank you.
You're right. It was all yours.
You're gross.
I am gross. Thank you as always for listening. I'm Matt, aka Stormageddon.
I'm MJ.
And we should go. Do you like movies?
Any movies. Old movies, new movies.
Bad movies.
Sad movies.
I'm Matt, aka Stormageddon.
And I'm Rachel Corky Shank.
And together we host Screen Snark, a movie podcast for movie lovers by movie lovers.
It's a podcast dedicated to the movies that are in our eyes, on our minds, and in our hearts.
Featuring guests of a wide selection of entertainment backgrounds, performers, writers, creatives.
So please join us for the casual cinema conversation every other Monday wherever you get your podcasts.
And follow us on Twitter at screen_snark, and we'll see you at the movies. All right, we're supposed to do that bit together.